Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now. Hi, are you
Okay, great.
Thanks. Sorry about the
it's
delay in
Elizabeth.
that. Yes, it is. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, yes, sorry, we had some technical difficulties, but I think it's all sorted now.
Okay, great.
Thanks. So you just wanted 5 minutes of your time to talk about the newsletter.
Yeah.
So firstly, so you produced this newsletter called Manchester Climate Monthly. What do you hope...
Sorry, you're recording
hear
now,
me?
I should be clear. Yeah?
Yes, we're recording now.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
So,
Again, sorry.
Yeah, so you produced this newsletter called Manchester Climate Monthly. What do you hope this achieves, or what do you want to get across to people?
So the context of Manchester Climate Fortnightly, as it was known initially, and then we became monthly, was that information about what's happening at the local government level used to be even more difficult to find out. So this was the days before Facebook had really taken off, before Twitter. And so it was always easy to find out international, national information about government policies. But if you tried to find out what Manchester City Council was or was not doing on climate change, it was virtually impossible because their website was, and still is, very clunky. The documents are hard to read, hard to understand, no context is ever given. So we started the newsletter, a few of us, back in 2008, to try and make it much easier for people to figure out what was going on about the city council. And we also wanted to celebrate the various forms of climate activism that were happening, whether it was very mainstream stuff or more non-violent direct action.
Oh, that's good. Because I heard that Manchester City Council declared the climate emergency over the summer.
They did.
How important do you think it was to get that motion passed?
It's too early to tell for sure, because we've already had lots of promises from Manchester City Council. It's coming up to the 10-year anniversary of them, under pressure from activists, creating the so-called Manchester Climate Change Action Plan. If you go back and look at that document, which was agreed by the Council in November 2009, it's full of strong promises which, if they had been kept, would have made a difference. And it's the same with this climate emergency declaration. Lots of nice promises. The problem is this, is that it's easy to make promises, and most people don't have the stamina and don't think it's their job to force the politicians to keep the promise. You know, we elect politicians, they're supposed to be adults, they're supposed to keep their promises. Now, we all know that they don't, but getting together with other people and forcing councils to either keep their promises or expose them when they're not keeping their promises is difficult. And I'm part of a group called Climate Emergency Manchester, which was set up before the Climate Emergency Declaration, set up in sort of March of this year. And one of our self-appointed tasks is to make sure that the council can't continue to make lovely promises and do nothing and have no one paying attention to them.
Yeah, there needs to be a follow-through from it.
There really does, and it's not the follow-through is not from the citizens, is not sort of going to a protest once every 3 months or once every 6 months in London. It's got to be a lot more local, a lot more specific. It's a lot harder work, basically.
Yeah, I think when you touched on an individual level, I think it can be kind of overwhelming. Like, what can you do to help? What, you feel like you don't really make a difference. So what do you think that somebody could do that could help? Like lobby their council or...
Well, I think in your question you supplied the answer.
Right.
On your own, very little. What will happen if you write to your politicians is you might get a reply, but if you keep pushing the issue with them and they say, I'm not happy with your answer, it was vague, it was not specific, then they'll just roll their eyes the next time they send you a letter and not bother to reply to you.
Yeah.
The only thing that politicians are scared of, as far as I can tell from my sort of 12 years of local climate activism, is if there's lots of people, all of whom are educated about what's going on, all of whom are aware of the different ways that the politicians fob you off. And it's not just the politicians, it's also the bureaucrats.
Yeah.
So you can't do it on your own. If you try to do it on your own, you'll probably go mad. So really, you need to find family and friends with whom you can do this, not just for 3 weeks or even 3 months, but I'm afraid this is going to be years. And I know that's really frustrating because, it's an emergency. Well, it is, but it's going to be an even bigger emergency in 3 years' time when the councils have not kept their promises. And so we really, as individuals, can't put ourselves at the center of the narrative as sort of some sort of individual savior. Everyone imagines themselves as Martin Luther King during the civil rights struggle. No one imagines themselves as the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who were working in their own communities who were ignored in the history books. But the reality is that Martin Luther King would not have been possible without those hundreds of thousands of people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's important to be aware of the issues, and that's what you guys do really over.
Yeah, we use Freedom of Information Acts to ferret out the information because they refuse to give it to you. Otherwise, they're legally obliged once you've put in a FOIA. We interview people, etc. It's hard work. It's quite boring, a lot of it. But you're not. Just because you're an activist doesn't mean you should expect always to be having fun.
Yeah.
And always to be sort of soaked in adrenaline and testosterone and the approval of the people around you. That's not what adults are supposed to be like.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, it's like a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying emotions and testosterone and adrenaline aren't important, and either hope or courage. But what happens is people keep chasing these special moments where they feel that they're winning, and that leads them to doing very repetitive, very easily ignored and easily controlled actions.
Do you find that there's a large audience for the content you're putting out, or people interested in it?
No, I'm going to be perfectly honest. People would much rather read about polar bears or Greta Thunberg than an account of the last scrutiny committee meeting at which the executive member for the environment basically ignored the councillors, and the councillors ignored the relevant questions and instead were obsessing about dog shit and lampposts. I mean, local politics is famously very, very tedious and boring, but I don't care because it's the right thing to do. I know I sound incredibly pompous. I don't really mind. It's the right thing to do. If I want to go chasing clicks and I want to go chasing website numbers, then there's other ways you can go about that, and you achieve nothing.
It's just important to have the information out there.
Well, information is, yes, it is important to have the information, but not to be so naive as to believe that once the information is out there, then anything will magically change.
Yeah.
But people will read it. All that, once a politician realizes that they've been exposed in the website Manchester Climate Monthly, they will suddenly change their behavior. They won't. The only thing that will get politicians changing their behavior is if dozens, hundreds of people are contacting them and saying, this is out of order, and I'm not going to vote for you next election, and I'm going to vote for whoever else is standing who has a stronger climate policy. Until that happens, I can put out all the information I like. It doesn't matter. There is a middle-class belief that information is somehow a solution in its own right, and that's simply false.
Yeah, because it's about action as well from politicians.
Yeah. But I mean, the actions have to be informed by information. You can't just blindly go off and denounce people for not having a climate plan when they actually do have one. You have to say, well, yes, you've got a climate plan, but you haven't done sections 1, 6, 12, 19, and 23 when you said you would. That is, in my opinion, legitimate action.
Yeah. Simply
running around in a polar bear costume or claiming that the world's going to end in 11 years, that's not activism, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, I think you've given some very interesting insights. I think that's all the questions I have for you. Unless there's anything else you want to share, you think it's important to share?
Look, so we mentioned this thing called Climate Emergency Manchester.net, and we have an email address, climateemergencymanchester@gmail.com, and we're a small group, and we're mostly focused on Manchester City Council, And we're always looking for people who want to join with us in doing some of this non-arrestable, not particularly sexy work, but it's also stuff that you can do from the comfort of your own home for an hour a week or 2 hours a month or whatever. We have jobs big and small, complex and simple. And if people want to know more, they can get in touch with us at climateemergencymanchester@gmail.com.
Okay, wonderful. We'll put that message out.
Great, thanks. Could I get a recording of this, by the way?
Yes, I can send it to you. I've got your email.
Lovely.
So,
Thank you very much.
Okay, wonderful.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Cheers,
Thanks.
Elizabeth. Well, good luck with the show.
Thank you very much.
All the
Thanks
best.
for your time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.